The Romans were the military superpower of the ancient world. But they were to suffer their biggest loss in September of the year 9 AD. The killer blow was dealt by the weather. Betrayed by their allies, lured into a trap. Over 3 desperate days, violent weather led to the destruction of 1/10 of Rome's military might. Around the world and throughout time, weather has played a part in the fortunes of mankind. Violent events in our planet's atmosphere have transformed history. These are the stories of weather that changed the world. Imagine that World War II never happened. And Europe has a history of peace instead of brutal violence. It might have been so if the Romans had completed their imperial ambitions. The empire spread across most of Europe, but Germania to the north remained unconquered. Had the Romans succeeded in defeating the Germanic tribes, the history of Europe would have been very different. A key factor in the Romans' failure was the weather. The year is 9 AD. The Roman Empire is extending its hold on Europe.
The Romans have conquered Gaul, what we call France today. Now they're heading east into what we think of as Germany. But these tribes are tough. The Romans aren't going to have it easy.
They fight during the summer months, and the season is drawing to an end. 3 Roman legions, more than 20,000 troops, are camped deep inside the Germanic tribes' territory. Winter is coming. The legions are preparing to move back to their safer winter quarters on the Rhine. They leave at first light. Little do they know, they will be wiped out before they make it. The Roman commander is Publius Quintilius Varus. He is in charge of the conquest of the German tribes, with 3 legions at his disposal. The armies of Rome have already conquered much of Europe with a well-practiced fighting style and deadly weaponry.
This is the type of sword that was used by the Roman army. A short blade, wide, leaf-shaped. They fought by getting close and striking a single blow. And with a sword like this, a wound that deep is fatal. It was almost like surgery. Step in, hit hard, and make a short but fatal blow.
The military strength of Rome is designed to be most effective on open terrain. The legions can quickly adopt different battle formations to counteract an enemy's tactics. Working as a well-oiled machine, they have been invincible until now. Varus favors a particular captain, Arminius. Though born the son of a Germanic chieftain, Arminius volunteered for the Roman army as a youth and has risen up the ranks. Varus treats him like a son. It's a bad choice. What the Roman commander doesn't know is that Arminius plans to betray him. He is plotting in secret with the Germanic tribes.
Arminius has marshaled several thousand Germanic tribesmen in secret. Arminius knows that he can't beat the Roman legions on open ground, so he plans to get them into unfavorable territory. A natural bottleneck, here with the Calcresa mountain on one side and vast impenetrable bog on the other.
The Romans outnumber the Germans by several thousand, but Arminius will soon gain an ally from above. As winter closes in, cold air spreads in from the Atlantic. A storm is brewing, threatening heavy rain and biting cold. For the Germanic tribes, violent storms are normal. For the Roman legions, more accustomed to fighting in the summer months, they are not. They continue south toward their winter camp. But there's word of a rebellion amongst the Germanic tribes.
Varus is an experienced commander. He hears of an uprising in the west. He knows if he puts it down quickly, it'll be another feather in his cap.
He reroutes his legions to face the rebellious tribes. It's exactly what Arminius has hoped for. He coordinated the uprisings to draw the Romans into the bottleneck. Arminius leaves to scout ahead. The moment has come to switch sides. He shadows the Romans as they march into his trap. The legion's route becomes increasingly narrow. They work hard to clear a path through the forest. The train is forced into a narrow column, stretched out to over 10 miles long. It's a deadly mistake. Varus's soldiers will lose their tactical advantage if forced to fight in the forest. The Germanic tribes are ready. For weeks, they've been building a series of ramparts that line the mountain's base. The ramparts would both hem the Romans in and provide a protective shield from which the tribesmen could attack.
The Germanic tribes are waiting, poised to attack as the Roman army struggles through the forest. When the column is far enough into the pass that it can't turn back, that's when the Germans attack. They hit the slow-moving Roman troops. They're already exhausted. They've been felling trees and building bridges in this inhospitable terrain.
The Romans fight back. They struggle to create a defensive line. They succeed, but now they are surrounded by the enemy and impossible terrain. They are inside the fatal trap. The Roman losses are huge. In just one day, the Germanic tribes slaughter 8 cohorts. That's 4,000 crack Roman troops. But the deciding factor will be the weather. "2,000 years ago, the future of a continent is changed by one man's treachery and a violent freak storm. A column of 20,000 Romans march into the Teutoburg forest to crush a tribal uprising. The line is 10 miles long. Arminius, a Roman captain of Germanic origin, has brought them here. But Arminius has betrayed them and now leads an ambush by the Germanic tribes. The Romans are under attack and have lost 4,000 men in just one day, and the battle will last 3 days. Several sections of the line are under attack at once. The Romans are disadvantaged from the start, but the deciding factor will be the weather.
Predicting the weather in Northern Europe was a very uncertain business for the Romans, especially for those who are more used to a warmer Mediterranean climate. Now, did the Germanic tribes know that there was a storm coming? Perhaps, but they were certainly much more used to that type of weather. And so when the storm came in, they were much better equipped to handle it.
On the second day, as the remaining Romans attempt to push through to safety, the weather turns. The thunder and lightning come first. Immediately, the odds swing in favor of the attackers. The Romans have a superstitious fear of the vast oak and birch woods of the Germanic lands. Dense forest like this is alien to them, and they've heard terrifying legends of the gods and spirits that live here. As the storm closes in, high winds blow through the branches, producing a deafening roar. The Romans must now be sure the gods are against them.
Storms are powerful things, a huge release of energy. If you're in the deep forest, lightning's flashing, trees may be coming down, there's noise all around you. And if you're someone who's not familiar with that type of weather, it could be absolutely terrifying.
With the Romans already frightened and under attack, the weather gods strike another blow. The heavens open. The forest battlefield is deluged by cold, relentless, torrential rain. For the Romans, it's a disaster. The narrow terrain makes it impossible to fight in formation. Now rain attacks their equipment. Trapped and surrounded, the legions rely on archers to keep the rebel tribes at bay. But their bowstrings are made of animal sinew.
The archers were absolutely vital, and it tends to be overlooked because everybody seems to think that the Romans relied entirely on their infantry. This is the kind of bow that was used by the Romans. The most interesting thing is the string, because it's not actually a string, it's made of animal sinew. And this kind of bow is extremely powerful. The world record for a bow like this is almost a mile. And you can see the power that it has in it, the speed that that arrow went at, and the depth that it went into. There are enormously powerful bows here. When the sinew bowstring gets wet, the string expands and the bow loses a lot of its power. The effect of that is that the archers become almost useless.
With the legions in disarray and their bows rendered useless by the rain, the tribes close in for the kill. How can the Romans escape from the onslaught on the ground or the fury of the skies? In 9 AD, 20,000 Roman soldiers fight for their lives. They have been led into a trap by the traitor Arminius. Now they face 15,000 Germanic warriors and a violent storm. The Romans are terrified by the thunder and lightning, and their bows are rendered useless by the rain. Now the attacking Germanic tribes let fly with sharp-tipped spears. The downpour has soaked the remaining Romans. The ground beneath their feet is turned to mud, and their armor weighs them down. Their superior equipment adds to their downfall.
The Roman soldier was trained to be able to march 25 miles in a day without any problem at all in kit that weighed as much as he did. When the equipment gets wet, instead of protecting you, it slows you down. You are effectively fighting with a huge burden.
For the tribespeople, that's not a problem. They fight without armor. There's little to stop a blade, but they're fast on their feet. As the huge Roman column tries to push through the forest, the Germans can pick them off at will. Their weapons are less refined than the Romans, but equally deadly.
This type of sword is the kind of sword that the Germans would have used. A long blade made for slashing with. This will cause horrible, big, bleeding wounds.
The constant rain exposes the Romans to an altogether more sinister enemy.
The problem with the amount of rain that there was that everybody would get covered in mud. In the mud is tetanus and gangrene. And if you take a cut under those conditions, you are going to die. That's all there is to it.
The storm lasts 3 days. The military might of Rome collapses under a furious attack. When General Varus realizes the extent of the disaster, he kills himself in the traditional way. In Rome, Emperor Augustus is severely shaken by the news of the lost legions. Never before has the empire endured such humiliation. One storm helps change the face of history. In the year 9 AD, in the Teutoburg forest of northern Germany, the Roman army suffers one of its most terrible defeats. Three legions are completely wiped out. Over 20,000 Romans perish at the hands of 15,000 Germanic tribesmen.
It's like many of the guerrilla wars through history, where one side simply wasn't prepared for the conditions on the ground. Think of the Americans in Vietnam or the Allies in Afghanistan. But this was much, much worse. In 3 days, the Roman army lost 10 times the number of troops that the Allies have lost in the last 10 years in Afghanistan.
The Germanic tribes left the grim battle scene untouched. The dead lay unburied and exposed for many years. It was a reminder to those passing that Rome was not so mighty after all. The unforgiving elements stripped the bodies to the bone.
Six years after the battle, the Roman commander Germanicus, the son of the emperor, returned to face Arminius. He suffered heavy losses over several years, but he was able to bury the victims of the earlier disaster.
The fragmented remains of the dead Roman soldiers were gathered together and placed in mass graves. Finally, the lost legions were laid to rest. The battle is a turning point in European history. Rome never does conquer the Germanic tribes. Europe remains divided. One storm helps Germanic and Latin cultures remain separate. The aftershocks of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest persist to this day. As military historian Major General Fuller has written, had Germany been for 4 centuries fully Romanized, one culture, not two, would have dominated the Western world. There would be no Charlemagne, no Louis XIV, no Napoleon, no Kaiser Wilhelm II, and no Hitler. It's a shocking thought, that a massacre triggered by a single storm could reach across 2,000 years of history. That a freak weather event could play a part in 2 world wars, in the murder of millions. There are forces that are beyond our control. The elements can define our destiny, and the weather can change the world.